Hello everyone. It is a little past 3:30. I wanted to give the last few people a few minutes to trickle in. My name is Randy Perry. I work for the City of San Jose in the Office of Employee Relations. So I am going to kind of kick off the first half of this presentation, talk a little bit about the difference between the defined benefit program and the VEBA, and kind of how we got to this place. And then my colleague Cheryl is on her way here, and she'll jump in when she gets here. And then after we are finished with our part of the presentation, Knud Goderup from Parallel Advisors will jump in and give the second half of the presentation. He has been hired by the city as an independent benefits consultant, and he'll tell you a little bit more about him and what he is here to do when he gets up to do his presentation, and he might be able to chime in for some of your questions too. But we are going to go ahead and get started. Before we get started, I like to get a lay of the land. Can I see the difference of how many people in the room are in a federated bargaining unit? Okay. And how many people here are sworn? Okay. And how many of you guys have received your letters in the mail with your VEBA contribution amounts? Okay. All right. I just like to get a feel of what we're working with here. So this presentation we're going to talk specifically about the option that you all have to either stay in the city's defined benefit retiree healthcare plan or to opt into the VEBA. So what is the city's current defined benefit plan? It is that the city will pay 100% of the lowest cost healthcare plan premium available to the actives based on your insurance tier. So if you're eligible for just the employee version, or employee plus spouse, or employee and family, the city will cover the 100% of the lowest cost healthcare plan in your retirement for the rest of your life and your spouse and dependents' lives. The retirees must pay the difference between the lowest cost plan and any plan that you would choose to step up to. For instance, right now, the lowest cost plan available to active employees is the Kaiser 1500 deductible plan. For a single person, the premium is $490 a year. If you would choose to join the Blue Shield PPO single program, the premium for that would be $1,004. You would be responsible for the difference between that $490 that the city is going to cover and the $1,004. You would be responsible for the difference between the two. For federated employees, they must have 15 years of service in order to vest in the defined benefit retiree healthcare plan. Sworn employees, it's a little bit different. You have to have 15 years of service if you retire directly from the city, or you have to have 20 years of service if you happen to leave the city and go work somewhere else and then retire later, if that makes sense. I can help explain that a little more if that's confusing to people. And at age 65, retirees are required to enroll in Medicare Parts A and B. Before I move on, any questions about the defined benefit plan? Yeah?
It's a new higher deductible plan. I think it's $3,000.
You already got to my next slide.
Is that going to be the lowest cost plan for future retirees?
So the lowest cost plan there is in the retirement agreement that the city has with the bargaining units. It lasts until 2025. It's a 10-year agreement. Is that the lowest cost plan can't go below the paying for 70% of the silver level according to the Affordable Care Act. So whatever that means for the next 10 years, that's what has been agreed upon between the unions and the city. Does that answer your question? Vaguely. So as of January 1st, 2018, the new lowest cost plan, like you said, will be that Kaiser 3000 plan. So employees that enroll in this plan, they are eligible for they are enrolled in a health savings account, which can be used for eligible medical expenses throughout the year. And that health savings account does roll over year to year. It's different than a flexible spending account. Flexible spending account, use it or lose it. If you don't spend it by the end of the year, it's gone. Health savings account is yours. It rolls over year to year, whatever you put into that health savings account. And the cost sharing for active employees and your benefits as an active employee are no different as a result of what we're talking about here. This option that you're making right now is just the option for your retiree healthcare benefits. So whatever you choose today, if you choose to opt into the VEBA, you are still eligible for all of the healthcare insurance premiums that you have as an active employee today. That doesn't change anything for your active employment. Any questions before I move on? I don't want everybody to get glazed eyes. It is getting late in the afternoon, I know. So a little bit of background. How did we get to this place? As you know, we agreed, the unions and the city agreed to a settlement in 2015, the Alternative Pension Reform Frameworks. And as part of that settlement was that we would close our current defined benefit program, retiree healthcare plan, and we would establish a VEBA for all new Tier 2 employees, new and current Tier 2 employees. Additionally, all of our Tier 2 employees are going into this VEBA, but we decided that we'll also give our Tier 1 employees the option to opt out of the defined benefit retiree healthcare plan and into this VEBA option. But what is a VEBA? Yeah.
I'm sorry, before we move on completely from the defined benefit retirement plan, so if I retire in whatever year I retire, 2030, and at that time the lowest cost plan is Kaiser, whatever. And then the next year, the city has a new lowest cost plan. So as a retiree, my plan could change every year, or am I locked into the one that I get when I retire?
I believe it could change. Yes, Kara, you want to answer that?
So your plan, you can still choose any one of the plans that you want, but the amount of money you have to pay will be based on that low cost plan.
Yes.
So that low cost plan costs the city $100 instead of, what was that, $460?
$490, yeah.
But I
You're
want
only
to
getting
get my
$100.
insurance, then I have
You'd
to,
have to make up that difference in money.
or change to a different plan
Yeah.
when they come up.
Yeah,
with a new
and so
plan.
there is no guarantee after the 10-year contract is up of what it will be.
Right.
Yeah, good point, Kara. I didn't pick up on that nuance. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to what is a VEBA? Okay. It is a healthcare trust fund under the very interesting Internal Revenue Code. If you need a reason to go to sleep tonight, you can go home and read that. The funds in the VEBA can be used to reimburse employees for post-retirement medical expenses, out-of-pocket healthcare costs for you, your spouse, and any qualified dependents. Did you have something to add, Kanoon? Oh, okay. Everything that goes into the VEBA is pre-tax. Everything that comes out of the VEBA and used on eligible Medicare expenses in your retirement is also not taxed. So that is the tax advantage of the VEBA account. You never pay taxes on that money because it's being used for those eligible medical expenses. We went through an RFP process. Voya Financial was chosen as the VEBA administrator. This is the same administrator that administers our 457 plan. So those of you who do choose to opt into the VEBA, your interfaces will look very similar to what you're doing in your 457 plan. So it should feel very familiar to many employees, the administration of the plan. Hi, Cheryl. Welcome.
Thank you.
We got to do a little switch because you need this.
Hi everyone, my name is Cheryl Parkman. I'm from the Office of Employee Relations. I'm going to be taking over for Randy in terms of doing this. I'm sure she did a great job though. Just what I wanted. Perfect. Okay, where did you leave off, Randy?
I just left off on Voya, will be the VEBA administrator.
Okay.
Cheryl just did this presentation for another group of people, so she's probably going to do a better job than me.
Here we go.
'Cause she's
Thank
well
you.
practiced.
Okay, Voya is the VEBA administrator, yes. So for those of you that have a 457 plan, what this means is you'll be able to view your 457 account and your VEBA account all on the same web page, which is pretty cool to see. In terms of if you receive a disability retirement from the city of San Jose, what's going to happen is if you join our VEBA and then you exhaust the funds into your VEBA, what you're going to get is actually the single premium of our defined benefit plan until one of two things happen. Either you reach Medicare age and you're able to enroll in Medicare, or you find another job and you're able to get benefits through them. So for those people that have a disability retirement, there is this provision to ensure that they do get some retiree healthcare benefit if they do not have any more money in their VEBA. Just so you know that after 5 years of service for a VEBA member, you can purchase the city's plans. However, please note that if you're a VEBA member, you're going to have your own experience pool. So that means anyone that's in the VEBA can be pulled together to buy whatever plans are available to city retirees at that time, but they are going to be pooled separately. What this means is that there could be a separate rate that would be associated with those because it is going to be a separate demographic and separate experience pool. All right, any questions so far about the defined benefit plan or what this is? Yes, in the back.
Disability retirement. So if I go out on a disability retirement 12 months from now, and I exhaust all the money in my VEBA, this plan still covers me until I'm 65?
That is correct. So if you decide to opt into so the question is, if I am in the VEBA and I retire 12 months from now, is this catastrophic retiree health care benefit still going to be there for me even though, it's been only 12 months, it's only been a year since I opted in? The answer is yes. So for anyone that goes into the VEBA, you get a disability retirement, you would still be covered by the single premium of the defined benefit plan until you either reach 65 or you find another job or other employment that does have benefits. So that also means, though, that your VEBA funds need to be exhausted in order for you to get on this, and it's only the single premium. You could not use it for if you had a spouse or dependents, so you could only get on for yourself for that catastrophic retirement disability benefit. Yeah. Yes, question in the back.
Okay, so the VEBA, even though it's typically only for when you hit 50, because you got the catastrophic, it would come into effect immediately and you would exhaust that first. Did I understand that? Before you got the catastrophic disability retirement health care?
So the question is, what would you have to exhaust first if you were in this? So the answer to that is you have to exhaust the funds in your VEBA before you have access to the other defined benefit plans. So let's say, and you also don't have to, if you get a disability retirement before the normal age of retirement, that's okay. So otherwise, if you want to use your VEBA money and you have a normal service retirement, for us in Federated Tier 1, it's 55. For some of the lucky people in Sworn, it's age 50. So if you have a disability retirement at age 32, you can start to use your money in the VEBA because it's meant for after retirement, and since you get a disability retirement, you can do that. So at age 32, I exhaust the funds in my VEBA. I no longer have any money in there. Then I get to get onto this catastrophic disability retiree health care plan until I find a job, or if I'm 32 and I am no longer able to work anywhere because of my disability, it would go up until you hit Medicare. Yeah, very good questions. Any questions on this slide or any of the previous slides? No, excellent job, Randy. Very proud of you. Alrighty, let's talk about what it means to either stay in the defined benefit plan or go into the VEBA in terms of contribution rates. Now, for the first part of this, the first column of this slide, these are the current rates that employees are paying in Tier 1 and Federated Tier 1 and Tier 2A. Now in police, you're paying 9.51% if you're in Tier 1 towards your retiree health care plan. If you decide to go into the defined benefit or stay in your defined benefit plan, so same plan as now, you would then switch to a rate of 8%. If you opt into the VEBA, you would pay a rate of 4%. This is employee only. The city does not have a matching contribution for VEBA. For defined benefit, the city for police pays up to a maximum of 11% of an annual required contribution. That means that the city will pay up to 11%. Right now they're paying in the range of about 10. For those in Federated who are in CAMP, AEA, or AMSP, your rate is 8.76. If you go into defined benefit, it's 7.5. If you go into the VEBA, that's 2.5. Again, employee only, not a matching employer contribution. If you're an MEF, CEO, IBW, or OE3, 8.6, 7.5, 3.5. If you're in Unit 99, 8.6 again, 7.5, but there's no ongoing contribution for employees in Unit 99, and that's due to some tax issues that we wanted to mitigate. If you decide you want to opt into the VEBA, what that means is you will receive an amount estimated to be your previous retiree healthcare contributions without interest into that VEBA account. Now, if you're in Tier 1 or Tier 2A, you should have received a letter that has that amount on the letter. If you were a special case, meaning you either had redeposit of funds because you left the city and then you came back, or you had a service credit purchase, or if you have a Quadro or a Sadro, you might be a special case and you might need to request that we do your contribution because it's a very complicated calculation. We need to make sure we get that right. But if you did not receive a letter, make sure to talk to Randy and myself and we can get you what your amount is. So let's talk about what it means if you move bargaining units. Let's say you move from MEF to camp. Your VEBA bargaining unit rate goes with you. So even if you go from camp to unit 99, you go from 2.5 to no contributions. So this is just a slide that basically tells you where your contributions are going to head depending on if you stay in our DB plan or you go into the VEBA. Now, if you want to stay in the defined benefit plan, you don't need to turn any forms in. You don't need to do anything on the logistics side. You just need to stay in. If you want to be in the VEBA, you do need to turn in that form that says, I agree to go into the VEBA, and you need to do so before December 1st. Alrighty, any questions about this slide? Yes?
Where does the 4% come from for police? Why did they come up with 4%?
That's a good question. So the question is, where did the 4% come from? And then we can extrapolate that to the 2.5 or 3.5. This was an agreement between the city and the bargaining units, and we basically sat down and said, how much do we think that our Tier 1 and Tier 2A employees would like to be saving mandatorily for their contributions? At the beginning, when all of the bargaining units were sitting down and deciding how much the opt-in contribution rate would be, we actually originally thought that the difference between these two rates was going to be taxable. Now, we received some positive indications from the IRS that this amount is not going to be taxable, and so we actually came up with this 4%. It used to be 5%, but we lowered it a little bit to try and encourage more people to opt in because they would be actually getting a little bit more take-home pay between the 9.51 and the 4%. But we did want to ensure that, and this was something that I think the city and the unions wanted to agree on, and we did agree on, that we did want to ensure that there were going to be some savings ongoing for our employees in our bargaining units. Very good question so far. Alrighty, what we're going to do now is talk a little bit about what's happening in Tier 2. So for police Tier 2, and actually right now in police Tier 2 and fire Tier 2, and we can change the slide, they're actually contributing nothing right now to the DB plan. It's much like federated. So federated and police and fire Tier 2 are not contributing anything to the defined benefit plan. But once the VEBA is implemented, that contribution rate will go to 4 for police, 2 for federated employees and bargaining units, and then again, no contribution for those in Unit 99, just because of that tax issue. So are there any Tier 2 employees in here? We got one. All right, be proud. Yeah, Tier 2. You're going to be going to this if you're Tier 2B. Now, maybe I've said this, but just to hammer it home, Tier 2A employees are federated employees who were hired between September 30th, 2012 and September 27th, 2013. Those are employees that have the option between the DB plan and the VEBA. If you are a federated employee hired after September 30th, or I'm sorry, September 27th, 2013, you're going into the VEBA. Police, fire, all Tier 2, you're mandated to go into the VEBA. Alrighty. So let's talk about a timeline and some next steps. So you should have received your letter with your contribution total. Please don't throw it away because it says that it's from the city. We would really appreciate if you took a look at it. We're right smack dab in the middle of our education period. And so if you have not signed up for a one-on-one meeting, please make sure to do so. I know that a lot of you did today, and that's really cool, and we definitely appreciate that. And then our opt-in period actually starts October 18th and lasts through December 1st. This is a one-time irrevocable election, and the reason why we're doing it in 2017 is because we were told it's a little bit like vacation sellback in that you need to do it in the calendar year preceding when it actually becomes effective. So that means we need to do it in 2017 for it to become effective in 2018. Alrighty. So moving on, we do have an independent benefits consultant here today. I hope a lot of you took advantage of Knut's time earlier on the one-on-one sessions, so you know a lot about this. But I think what I want to do now is, if there are no more questions for me, oh, there are, yeah, keep them coming, all right.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
So there's no contribution from the city in the VEBA, it's only employee contributions?
Yes, at this time, there is no contribution from the city.
Okay.
Yeah, just your employee money that's going in there. Any others? I know this is super complicated. Yes, Knud, you have a question for me?
If you choose the VEBA option and you pass away and don't have any beneficiaries, or the last beneficiary passes away, what happens to the remaining balance?
Great. So the question is, what happens to your balance if you no longer have any beneficiaries after you pass away? The answer is that money is then spread out over the remaining plan members. But if you pass away and you do have a spouse, your benefit can go to the spouse, a qualified dependent, meaning a child under 26 or under, or a child that's been deemed to be your dependent for life, it can go to them, but afterwards that money goes to the other plan participants. And what we're doing is we're actually creating 2 trusts for the VEBA. One is a police and fire trust that will just be for police and fire members, and the other one is a federated trust that will be just for the federated members. And if you switch over in your career, it's probably going to be the one that you were in last. Alrighty. Yes, oh yeah, what's your question?
So what if you're getting health insurance through your spouse? How does VEBA work?
That's a great question. So, and I also want to make sure that we know the difference, that this is just for retiree health care insurance, not for active. So the question is, if you have a spouse that gets retiree health care, how will this affect you? So the answer is, if you have a spouse that gets retiree health care benefits, that's a pretty good factor to consider when you're thinking about opting into the VEBA, because that means you can use your VEBA money to pay for maybe some of the premiums of your spouse's plan. So for example, in Randy's portion of this, we were saying, okay, so let's say you have a spouse that also works for the city, right? And they get this defined benefit plan. If you wanted to opt into the VEBA, what you would be doing is paying the difference. If you wanted to buy up to the Blue Shield PPO, paying the difference between the $490 and the $1,000, you could spend some of your VEBA money to help pay up to that Blue Shield PPO. So it's definitely a factor to consider if you have a spouse that has retiree health care benefits, because you don't necessarily need to be double covered in retirement. One person can be covered, and then you can spend the rest of your money on things like co-pays or prescriptions, dental, vision, things like that. And right now, what we actually have on our website is a list of all VEBA eligible expenses. So if you were wondering, hey, what can I actually get reimbursed from my VEBA account? You can go to sanjoseca.gov/VEBA and take a look at what those eligible expenses are. There's quite a big list. Some of them you don't need a prescription for, some of them you do. We also have an email address. I'm sure a lot of you have utilized it, but just in case you haven't, it's VEBA@sanjoseca.gov. And we also have a phone line. It's 535-VEBA or 535-8322. You can thank the good people at IT for putting that one together for us. And yeah, so any other questions about, yes, keep them coming because we don't have any slides, so we should do questions.
For the Kaiser lowest plan, moved from 2018 to 4 for 10 years, is $3,000 for the premium, correct? And then for the family, $6,000? Is that right?
Yeah, so the question is, what is going on with this Kaiser 3,000 deductible plan? So it's actually the amount of 3,000 for single is the deductible on it, and 6,000 would be for a family. That's the deductible. But in terms of what the premium is, we don't have the rates yet from HR. We should be seeing what those rates are next week. But any of the cost sharing for active employees is still going to be based on the 85-15 split of the Kaiser $25 copay.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Because then I'm just concerned with the Blue Shield PPO. Those numbers are, you guys are trying to figure that out moving forward.
Right. So the number that you saw in there that was the 1,004, that was the single retiree rate in 2017. I do not know what that rate is because I haven't seen the rates yet from HR of what those rates are going to be starting January 1st, 2018. But cost sharing for actives is still going to be 85-15 split, lowest cost non-deductible. But cost sharing for retirees is changing to be that $3,000 deductible plan. Yeah. So with, I love questions, so keep them coming. I know this is not easy. It's super complicated. You're probably like, why should we even have to make this decision? But I'm glad you guys are here listening to me today. Right there. So the question is, for Tier 2B employees, is it a mandatory contribution? The answer is yes. So it is a mandatory contribution that the city and the bargaining units collectively bargained to help employees in Tier 2B save for their retiree health care costs, because as you saw from that chart, they weren't saving anything towards any retiree health care. So that was a choice to help them save a little bit. Because even if you can retire in Tier 2 and federated at age 62, you still have 3 years before you hit Medicare. So there's still a 3-year gap where you're still going to need to pay for pay for some insurance. So there's that. Yes?
I might have missed, did you say, so when we get to that point when we're using the VEBA, how is it that it's paid out? Like, how do we use it? I mean, do we send the bills to them? Do they, I mean?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, how do you actually get to use your VEBA money? You have this pot of money, how do I get to it? So there are a couple ways. You can do reimbursements, which means you can submit through mail, email, or even through a scan online of your medical receipts. They are working on a debit card option, so if you go to your Kaiser appointment and you need to pay a copay, you would be able to pay it from there. So they are working on it. So in time for us to use the VEBA, they should have it. But right now their main focus is on those reimbursements. It's kind of like if you have the flexible spending account currently with the city and you have to submit those reimbursement documents. That's how they're primarily focused on doing it right now. Great question. Yes, in the back.
I might have missed this, but after retirement, if you've elected the VEBA, can you still get the same group plan rate that people who are not in the VEBA are getting, for instance, Kaiser?
So the question is, if you are in the VEBA, do you still get access to the same group rates and group plans as people in the defined benefit plan? The answer is you can get access to the same plans. However, VEBA members are going to be pooled separately from the city defined benefit members. So the rates may be increased for that pool, just depending on what the demographics of those in the VEBA pool are. Unfortunately, because we don't know who's going to be in that pool yet, we don't know what that experience or what those rates will be, but you will have access to them. If if that's not an option for you because you don't want to use the city's plans, or you're moving out of state where they don't necessarily have a Kaiser or Sutter, and you think you can get a better rate than a Blue Shield PPO, you can go out to one of the exchanges and purchase through them or something like that. But that's how a VEBA employee would be able to access the city plan. And also, just remember, if you're in the VEBA, you need to be here for 5 years in order to have access to those city retiree plans pooled separately. Yeah, but good question. Okay, good questions, guys. I really appreciate it. As they're coming, as you're thinking of them, feel free to raise your hand. But I am going to turn it over to Knud so he can talk to you a little bit about this VEBA decision and other factors to consider. And I probably need to give him a microphone. Hopefully I didn't.
Sorry.
I think this just pulls out. There we go.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
Oh. And this you just put in your pocket.
I feel like I'm the Kardashian show with that.
Just like everyday life, right?
Yeah, just like every day. I'm on a reality show, so.
I'm sure that's fine.
Alrighty, here you go.
Is that all right? Hi, everyone. We're moving into the extremely riveting part of the presentation this afternoon. Hope no one had a really big lunch. My name is Knud Gotterup. I'm the Director of Retirement Plan Services for Parallel Advisors. Parallel Advisors has been hired by the city to help employees with this decision. And how we're doing that is it's really the educational campaign. So we're providing these group sessions, one-on-one sessions. We are prepared to provide webinars. This recorded presentation will hopefully be up on the VEBA site shortly so that you can go and visit it and scroll back and go forward and take a look at it a couple times. And good luck explaining this to your spouse. We are a firm that offers wealth management services, works with retirement plans, individuals, families. One of the key components that we work with, though, is individuals, families, households in the area of financial planning, retirement planning, and advanced financial planning, tax, and so on and so forth. And that's really the scope of our help with all of you today and through this process. So we sit with you when you have a pretty good feeling for the components of the plan and related to the decision. We sit with you, and in a meeting we'll look at what you have in play as well as some things maybe outside. So earlier this week I met with one of the employees, and this employee had 3 rental homes. And how does the income from that come into play, and whether or not that helps or influences the VEBA decision. Another person, that individual has a spouse that works for Kaiser, and that person's going to get medical benefits in retirement. The employee, the San Jose City employee, is also getting some VA benefits. So which option and how do those things influence? We haven't had anybody that has won the lottery and come forward. So that could obviously influence your situation and what your choice is. So we'll go through this and hopefully fill in some blanks if you have them, and please ask questions along the way. This information is really the same as you saw earlier in the presentation, so I won't spend the time on that. Other than to say is that the VEBA website is being updated constantly with information. The updated presentations, the updated question and answer library, if you will. I would refer to that if you have questions about at least every week as you go through this process. One other thing before I move forward, I need to mention to you, I think it's important, you're consumers of investment products, of employee benefit products, and so if I'm in your seat, I want to know, okay, how is Parallel getting compensated? We are being compensated based on the event that we deliver. We do not get compensated in any way, shape, or form on your decision. So when we sit down and discuss things with you and make a recommendation to you, it is not at all influenced by the decision that you make. Okay, so, and related to that, we are a fee-only investment advisory firm. We never get compensated from investment products, which allows us to keep Voya and others at bay and do what's best for our clients. One of the most important factors in influencing your decision is if you have a spouse with benefits. If you have a spouse that works at the city, another municipality, as I mentioned before, met with an employee who has a spouse that works at Kaiser, any spouse that has retirement benefits, that allows you some flexibility. Out of the gate without knowing anything else, I would usually suggest that someone considers that one spouse chooses the defined benefit arrangement from their employer, and the other spouse, the City of San Jose spouse, chooses the VEBA. That way you're diversified, you can pull and plug and play as to which will be best throughout retirement. Second is that 15 years of city service. So if you are 10 years in and you know you're leaving here 2 years from now, choose the VEBA option because you have to complete 15 years of service to be eligible for the defined benefit option. So if you're leaving in 2 years and you're in the defined benefit option, what are you going to get? Zero, nothing. At least if you move into the VEBA solution, you'll get those monies, right? So that'll be something to take with you. Special medical needs. If you have pre-existing serious conditions where there is pretty costly, potentially out-of-pocket expenses if you were to make some changes, costly treatment, et cetera, for those folks, depending on how soon the employee is retiring, the San Jose City employee is retiring, you just might not be able to take the risk. The risk might be much better, might be much higher choosing the VEBA, and so you might choose the defined benefit plan option. Early retirement before Medicare eligibility, if you're retiring at age 50 or 55, and so that's a lot earlier than 65, which is when Medicare kicks in. That could easily influence your decision. See, VEBA participants, if you contribute to the VEBA plan, it's about half of what you would contribute to the defined benefit plan. So as a result, your take-home pay will be a bit higher, approximately 4%, give or take a little bit, depending on which group that you're in. The other thing is that I'm suggesting to most employees, if they're going to choose the VEBA option, don't have that influence your take-home pay. Contribute the difference between what you have been contributing between the two, the defined benefit plan and the VEBA. take that and put that in the 457 plan. That way you're increasing your retirement savings. That retirement savings in the 457 plan can be used for anything. That also can go to any beneficiary you want, and that always remains with you. So it allows you some flexibility. Keep in mind the 457 plan contributions are also tax deductible when you make those contributions. When the money comes out, though, it is taxable. Other assets, investments, rental property, I touched on that a little bit. Inheritance and significant lottery. Inheritance, the way our firm works when we do advanced planning or financial plans for folks, we don't count that money until you've received it, until it's in your checking account. We've seen situations where things get tied up in court, probate, family members arguing about the situation that can really draw things out. So if it's imminent that you're about to receive monies or have already received an inheritance, you might have the financial flexibility to choose the VEBA versus the defined benefit option. Also, keep in mind that in retirement, the pension income, and some of you have a really nice inflation COLA on that pension income, that could be used as the VEBA runs out to pay for the medical cares. Maybe that's the smart solution for some of you. Let me add one other item here, and it's public information, but I think it's worth noting that the defined benefit plan is 70% underfunded. So this isn't new news, it's public information. I would say that it wouldn't be unheard of, and if at some point in the future that the benefits under the defined benefit plan or the cost structure might change as a result of that. I think that you'd probably all agree that's reasonable. And that isn't just specific to San Jose. Municipalities across the country, as well as the state of Illinois, certainly Detroit, they've had to make adjustments, and so this is somewhat common, unfortunately. Healthcare costs in retirement. We're going to touch just a little bit on the costs and Medicare. So spending by age and category. If you're age 55 to 64, that's typically about 9% of your budget. As you age 65 plus, it's about 12% of your budget. And then the average inflation spending for healthcare is 4.9%. So this slide, this is some information that was provided by JP Morgan and a couple of other organizations. They're expecting healthcare costs to go up by 4.9%. Under traditional Medicare, estimated median care cost per person, if you're age 65 in 2017, that's $5,140 per year. Understand that Part A and Part B are mandatory. When you turn 65, both of those you have to get. Part B you pay for, Part A everyone gets. Part B right now is $1,610. These next two sections, which is Medigap F and Part D, those are, I just forgot the name for that. Those are supplemental. And as a result, the plan options that are available through San Jose in retirement, those are some alternatives to those. This slide is the slide about a little bit about Medicare. It's included in the presentation, so when you go online and look at it at the VEBA site, it's just a good basic so that you get a pretty quick understanding of the components of Medicare. Medicare in and of itself can be a pretty daunting decision and complex, so here's some support there. Let's talk about some samples of employee projections. What we did here is we put a couple of samples together. Hopefully there's one or two that might be a little bit similar to your situation. What we did is we start with the VEBA eligible contribution amount, and I refer to it a bit as the rollover. That money is coming out of the defined benefit plan and going into the VEBA. That money is all the money that you have put into the defined benefit plan over the years. So it comes out of the defined benefit plan and goes in. Where can you find this number? Everyone that got their letter saw the hands go up earlier. In the top right box on the letter, the amount is right in that box. If you lost your letter, I heard that some people got the letters and it didn't have the logo, so they tossed it out thinking it was junk mail. please reach out to the phone number on the VEBA website or the email address and request that information. Pretty important component, obviously, to make a decision. Current salary, age 51, spouse or domestic partner, yes. Years to retirement, 4. Tier 1, salary COLA is 2%, and then lowest cost plan available. It's actually $490.20, but because this individual is married, it's double that. We come over here, years of service, starting pension amount, pension COLA, 3% increase on that. Annual investment again, we assumed 5%, which is on the investments in the VEBA, as well as the investments in the 457. I'm going to repeat this. The investment options are the same in both, so you might want to invest them a little bit differently since you'll probably be using the VEBA monies first before the 457 plan monies, but we estimated 5%. VEBA contribution rate, 3.5% in this example, and healthcare inflation, we're assuming 4.25%, which has to do with the Medicare costs. So we start out here, age 51, there's the $90,000 in compensation and the initial rollover, and the first year VEBA contribution of 3.5%. Investment gain, that gain is on the initial rollover amount. Because the VEBA contribution was going in during the course of the year, we just didn't put any gains on that during the year. So you end up at the end of your first year, you end up with $69,000. What we're saying is if you're putting in 3.5% here, we're going to have you continue to put in 4% in the 457. This is just for illustrative. Of course, you don't have to do that. It's just a suggestion to see versus doing the defined benefit plan how much money you're going to accumulate. So what we've done here is we show the contribution going in, and then at age 55, 4 years later than 51, you start receiving your pension. You don't have any contributions anymore, right, because that's part of employment. The investment gain now is on the $81,000 balance. Low cost plan, this amount is for 1 month for 2 individuals. So that was inflated over the years from 51 to 54. Now it's $14,000 a year. You pull that out of the VEBA balance so it drops down. And each year you can see it declining by that amount. And in this scenario, you run out of monies in the VEBA balance at age 61, and then you still have monies over here in the 457 as well as the pension. So you have 2 ways here. You can start using the 457 or the pension. We didn't reduce the pension or the 57 because that's a decision that you may make on your own. And then down here at age 65, the amount drops a little bit because we're presuming that there's going to be a little savings when Medicare kicks in. So any questions about this first example? The second example is someone who's a bit younger. Instead of 51, they're 46. Lower rollover contribution, VEBA contribution, initial contribution, current salary 64, 10 years service, starting pension about $50,500. We come down here, this person is not married or a domestic partner, tier 1, so that's $490. And you can see, so in the first year here at age 46, this person has $64,000 of annual income, initial rollover. So you can see every 5 years after that, 69,000 annual income, 76, and then they go to their pension. And we can see here that we run out of money in this case at about age, between ages 70 and 75, and then we still have about $109,000 to pay for the Medicare costs in the out of the 457 plan. So you can see here in this case, still $109,000 at $18,000 a year. That should last a fairly long period of time. So between those first 2 examples, the younger that you are, between not considering much else, but the younger that you are, it helps if you're going to choose the VEBA option. This is the third example. Eligible contribution is 26, current salary 88, starting pension 98, years of service 4. This person's only 34 years of age. And we can see here that when Medicare kicks in, we just about run out of money here we run out of money between age 60 and 70, 65 and 70, and then we still have $255,000 left. So this one seems more like a no-brainer, agreed? And then this one is example 4, and this one may be a little bit near and dear to your heart. This is Police Tier 1, current salary 124, VEBA contribution, initial contribution of 98, starting pension of just about $94,000. We can see at age 45, $124,000 in income, rollover amount, VEBA balance after the first year has almost $108,000 in it. At age 50, 5 years later, the VEBA balance is now swelled up to $147,000, and that starts depleting now and is depleted by age 60. So over a 10-year period, at age 60, we still have about $50,000, enough to cover for 2 years out of the 457. But look at, in this case, because of the salary COLA, we've run that up, and that increase in compensation now, when we start running out of monies here, is pretty sufficient to potentially take on this Medicare cost. So each person has a little bit different scenario than everyone else, but we tried to put together some samples that would give you a little bit of a flavor for the different options. Again, if you're going to be working a long time before retiring, that is one factor that makes the VEBA attractive. If you have a spouse with retirement benefits related to health care, that is definitely a factor. If you have other assets outside, that is a factor. If you are leaving before you're eligible for the defined benefit, so in less than 15 years, if you're leaving, that is certainly a factor to choose the VEBA option.
And just to point out one thing for sworn police and fire, if you leave the city before retiring, you actually have to vest 20 years in retiree health care in order to collect that benefit. So if you separate service with less than 20 years, you're not able to use our benefit. But if you retire from the city, you only need 15. So that's a nuance between sworn and federated in terms of the amount you need to be vested in our plans.
I'll repeat that for the mic. If you are sworn, instead of the 15-year eligibility, it becomes 20 years.
If you separate from city service before retiring.
If you separate from city service before retiring. Thank you. So a couple of things regarding the investing as it relates to the 457 and also the VEBA. The younger that you are, the higher the probability that you can grow your assets. And if you ask most people about investing for retirement through their employer's plans or IRA accounts, the first thing that retirees usually say when they're surveyed is, I should have started sooner. The second thing they say is, I should have put away more. And the third thing they say is, I should have bought Google at $17 or something like that, right? And that third item, none of us can control that. If I could, I'd be somewhere else. But the first two items, you do have some control over those. So preparing for retirement. Life expectancy. If you are 65 today, men have an 85% chance of reaching the age of 75 and women 85 and men 79. If you're married, it's 97. Why is that? Why do you think that is? Men are stronger. How does that relate to 97% though? Well, one thing is that it's two people splitting one household, right? It's a little bit easier, a little bit less stressful, things like that. You can see on the table here, the life expectancy back in 1990 for women was 84, men 80, 4-year difference. 2015, it's 2.4, and 2090, it's projected to be 2%, 2 years difference. Part of the reason is what the science says is that women are in the workforce and they become our drinking and smoking buddies. So we've chopped off a few years of their life expectancy. A couple of months back, I had this slide up in a presentation, and somebody wanted to know, oh, let me go through this. The chance of reaching 85 if you're a female is 55%, a male 43%, but if you're married, 74%. So if you're married, please plan on living at least 85 years and make sure your savings are adequate for that. We had somebody a couple presentations ago, this is about a couple months ago actually, that said, I'd like to see the difference between this number of a married couple versus a man with a pet and a woman with a pet. They'd all be about the same, he said. So that was kind of funny. But understand that life expectancy will continue to increase, and the science behind expanding life expectancies is going to be really changing rapidly over the next 20 years. So what do we do with our monies once we invest it? And we know it needs to be invested for a long period of time for retirement, but we also have expenses along the way during retirement. Well, this is called the bucket strategy. So the first bucket here is, within 1 to 3 years, you need to have some savings where you're not exposing it all to the stock market, right? If the stock market were to drop 15% and you have $15,000 put aside for a new roof for your home, and it drops 15%, what just happened to your new roof? You get part of a new roof. So you need to keep that saved a little bit more conservatively. So that's cash and cash equivalents. Intermediate term savings, 10 years from now you're going to replace your car. Maybe it's the dream vacation to Tuscany. Not Toledo, Tuscany. And then the longer term, you have a significant exposure to equity here. So you have different portfolios to accomplish different timeline objectives. And then one of the last slides here is less diversified portfolio, more diversified portfolio. It's really the power of diversification, diversified appropriately. So when you're investing those monies in the VEBA or in the 457, diversifying them very well could result in a difference in return here. This example, 6.4% versus 7.2. You think about 0.5%. Well, 0.5% on $100,000, that's $500 a year. What does $500 do for you? A couple of nice dinners in retirement. But here's the other part. The volatility is higher in the less diversified portfolio. So what we've done is we've managed to increase the return and reduce the volatility. One of the things that we see for folks in retirement, they'll invest in 3, 4, about 5, maybe 6 different funds. And most of those funds will be invested in the U.S. large company stocks. And the reason being is those are the investments that have done the best over the last 7, 8 years. And so that person thinks they're diversified because they invested in 6 different mutual funds that are invested in the same thing. You'll see this year the performance is showing already a trend towards parts of international investments as well as emerging markets. So staying diversified is quite important. Keep that in mind. And then one of the last slides is this slide shows which are the least favorable and most favorable states for retirement. Least favorable, which is not tax friendly down here in the yellowish orange. Which state on the far left is least friendly? It happens to be the same place you're working and living unless some of you commute from out of state. Anyone commute from out of state? Not yet anyway, right? Maybe after this slide, we'll pack up our bags. U-Haul's pulling up at 3 p.m. We're all moving to Idaho. But you can also see Nevada, Wyoming, Colorado, South Dakota, etc. Some of these states have no state income tax, and so they're very attractive. So imagine moving to South Dakota. Great idea, lower cost of living, lower tax rates. And one of the other advantages is your money goes a longer way there, so you can buy a bigger piece of property. And in the middle of winter when you're freezing to death and wondering why you made this decision because it's so cold, when you scream out loud about it, the best thing is your neighbors won't hear you because they're too far away. But I'm kidding here, trying to keep it a little bit light, but folks are really rethinking retirement and where they're going to live. They're moving to other tax-friendly states, Nevada, Florida, and they're moving out of the country. Well, there's Alaska. I don't hear that one for retirement too often, but they're moving out of the country. Panama, a lot of expatriates there. Thailand, Philippines, Mexico. So people are looking at their options because they're realizing that maybe in the Bay Area, the area with, if not the highest cost of living, easily in the top 3 in the entire country, maybe their dollars will go further somewhere else. And if they haven't saved quite enough to be able to accomplish retirement here, that's one option. Moving in with your kids is another. No one seemed excited about that. So to wrap up, additional resources. San Jose City website, sanjoseca.gov/VEBA. Questions about, especially about the plans. I have some knowledge about them. The team has gotten me up to speed quite quickly, and they're awesome. But they are the specialists in the areas about the plans. Financial planning, investment, tax-related, those types of items. Happy to help you with that. Available still until 7 this evening. There's some one-on-one slots. And if not, you can try and come by for a drop-in session. If you're interested in meeting and today just doesn't work out, make sure Randy gets your information and we'll try and coordinate something. Okay? On our website, there's a pre-retirement calculator. It doesn't take into consideration all the pension and VEBA information, but you can go through and run a little retirement scenario, and maybe that will help you as well. Question? Yep.
Do you understand that the city's hired you, but that we can tap you for investment advice and retirement advice?
So yes, understand that we're dividing up these appointments in 20-minute segments. So this is going to be a kind of a quick blast. This is going to be investment management coaching light, financial planning light. I've told a few people today that based on their situation, there was a couple of people that I thought maybe going out and getting a financial plan because of the other items as well outside of the plan might make a lot of sense. And we see those costing about $1,500 to $3,000. We also offer those services, but I'm not here during this process really to promote our services. But you can go and ask folks that you know and trust that have used advisors, and we're happy to refer you to some if you want to work with someone else. If you want to compare that to our services, yes. But in that 20-minute meeting, we can cover a lot of ground if you bring your statements. Whatever you bring in that meeting is what I will cover with you. If I run out of time on my own dime, I'll call you and we'll go through some things. But I can't spend, obviously, 3,500 employees are going through this process, so I can't spend a great amount of time, but they've hired us to give you some basic core help immediately in the event that it's needed. Okay, thank you. That was a good question. We haven't had that one yet. Any other questions? Nope. Thank you.